Sarah clutched the wooden bucket against her chest as she made her way down the familiar path to the river. The morning mist hung low over the water, and the sound of rushing current filled the quiet air. At 14, she had been making this journey every dawn for 3 years. Ever since Mrs. Henderson took her in after the fever claimed her parents. The orphanage had been crowded and cold, but Mrs. Henderson's small cabin offered something different. It wasn't luxury, but it was kindness. Sarah earned her keep by fetching water, tending the small garden, and helping with the endless mending that kept them both clothed. As she approached the riverbank, something caught her attention. A figure sat hunched by the water's edge, partially hidden behind the large boulder where Sarah usually filled her bucket. Moving closer, she could see it was a young native girl, perhaps her own age, with long black hair that fell like a curtain around her face. The girl looked up at Sarah's approach, and their eyes met. Fear flashed across the stranger's features, but she didn't run. Instead, she tried to stand, and Sarah immediately saw why she hadn't fled. The girl's left leg was clearly injured, and she couldn't put her full weight on it. "You're hurt," Sarah said softly, setting down her bucket. She had learned some basic words in the local tribal language from trading posts, though her pronunciation was clumsy. "Pain, leg pain?" The girl nodded slowly, understanding more English than Sarah expected. "Twisted," she said carefully, pointing to her ankle. "Running, fell." Sarah looked around nervously. The tensions between the settlers and the local tribes had been growing worse each month. Just last week, there had been another incident at the Miller farm, though nobody could agree on who started what. Mrs. Henderson always said that fear made people do terrible things to each other. But Sarah knew that helping this girl could bring serious trouble. Still, she couldn't just walk away. The girl was clearly in pain, and the river was deep and dangerous even for someone with 2 good legs. "My name is Sarah," she said, pointing to herself. The girl hesitated, then responded, "Ayana." Sarah studied the rushing water. The current was strong from the recent rains, and there were several deep spots where even she had to be careful. For someone with an injured leg, crossing alone would be nearly impossible. "You need to cross?" Sarah asked, pointing across the river. Ayana nodded, then tried again to stand. She made it upright, but immediately winced and nearly fell again. Sarah caught her arm, steadying her. The smart thing would be to walk away. The safe thing would be to pretend she had never seen anything. But looking at Ayana's determined face, Sarah knew she couldn't abandon her. "I help," she said simply. "We crossed together." Ayana's eyes widened. She searched Sarah's face, perhaps looking for some trick or trap. Finding none, she nodded gratefully. Sarah retrieved her bucket and filled it quickly. Then she returned to Ayana and carefully positioned herself on the injured girl's left side. "Hold my shoulder," she instructed, demonstrating. They entered the water slowly. The current immediately tugged at their legs, and Sarah felt Ayana tense beside her. The river bottom was slippery with smooth stones, and each step required careful balance. "Slow," Sarah murmured, as much to herself as to Ayana. "Very slow." About halfway across, they encountered the deepest section. The water rose to their waists, and the current grew stronger. Ayana's grip on Sarah's shoulder tightened, and Sarah could feel her trembling from both cold and fear. "Almost there," Sarah encouraged, though she was beginning to worry herself. The far bank seemed much further away than usual, and her legs were getting tired from fighting the current while supporting Ayana's weight. A particularly strong surge of water knocked them both off balance. For a terrifying moment, Sarah thought they would both be swept downstream, but somehow they managed to regain their footing, water streaming from their hair and clothes. "You strong," Ayana said breathlessly, and Sarah felt a surge of pride despite their dangerous situation. The final stretch to the far bank required climbing over several large rocks that jutted out of the water. Sarah went first, then turned to help pull Ayana up. With her injured leg, each movement was clearly painful, but Ayana didn't complain. Finally, they stood dripping on the opposite shore. Sarah's bucket had somehow survived the crossing, though it was now empty. Ayana immediately sat down on a fallen log, relief evident on her face. "Thank you," she said in clear English. "You saved me." Sarah sat beside her, both girls catching their breath. "Where do you go now?" she asked. Ayana pointed into the forest. "My people. Village far." She paused, studying Sarah's face again. "Why you help?" "Your people." "My people. Not friends." It was a fair question, and Sarah considered it seriously. "You needed help," she said finally. "That's enough." Ayana smiled for the first time, transforming her entire face. She reached into a small pouch at her waist and pulled out something small and white. It was a carved bone pendant in the shape of a bird with outstretched wings. "For you," she said, pressing it into Sarah's palm. "Eagle. For courage." Sarah looked down at the delicate carving. "I can't take this." "You must," Ayana insisted. "Gift for gift. You give me crossing. I give you protection." Sarah closed her fingers around the pendant. It felt warm from Ayana's touch. "Protection?" But Ayana was already struggling to her feet. "I go now, before sun high." She tested her weight on her injured leg and winced but managed to stay upright. "Wait," Sarah called as Ayana began limping toward the forest. "Your leg will heal," Ayana replied. She turned back one more time. "You good heart, Sarah. Eagle will remember." With that, she disappeared into the thick undergrowth, leaving Sarah alone on the riverbank with only the carved pendant as proof that the encounter had really happened. Sarah looked across the river toward home, suddenly realizing she would have to cross back alone with her bucket. The water seemed even more intimidating now, but she had no choice. Mrs. Henderson would be worried if she took much longer. As she prepared for the return journey, Sarah slipped the leather cord of the pendant over her head. The bone felt smooth against her skin, and somehow it made her feel braver. She had helped someone today, regardless of the complications it might bring. Little did she know that her simple act of kindness had been witnessed by eyes hidden in the forest, and that word of her deed was already traveling swiftly through paths known only to the native tribes. Sarah managed the return crossing without incident, though her legs shook from exhaustion by the time she reached the familiar shore. The carved eagle pendant bounced against her chest with each step as she climbed the path home, a constant reminder of the morning's unexpected encounter. Mrs. Henderson was waiting in the doorway when Sarah approached the small cabin, her weathered face creased with concern. "Child, you've been gone near an hour. I was starting to worry something had happened." Sarah hefted the bucket, grateful it was full despite everything. The current was strong today. "Took longer than usual?" The older woman studied Sarah's damp clothes and disheveled hair. "You look like you took a swim rather than just filled a bucket." Heat crept up Sarah's neck. Mrs. Henderson had keen eyes and a way of reading people that made lying nearly impossible. "I slipped on the rocks," she said, which was technically true. Mrs. Henderson accepted this explanation, though her expression suggested she suspected there was more to the story. "Well, get yourself into dry clothes before you catch your death. And mind that pendant doesn't show. People in town are jumpy enough these days without seeing native crafts around your neck." Sarah's hand flew to her throat, surprised that Mrs. Henderson had noticed the pendant so quickly. She had meant to hide it under her dress, but in her haste to explain her lateness, she had forgotten. "It's nothing important," Sarah mumbled, tucking the eagle beneath her collar. "Everything's important these days, child," Mrs. Henderson said gently. "Tensions are running high since the Garrett boy went missing last month. People are looking for reasons to be afraid, and anything different gets noticed." Sarah nodded, understanding the warning. The Garrett family lived 2 farms over, and their youngest son had vanished while checking their furthest field. Some blamed wolves. Others suspected he had simply run off to join a traveling merchant, but many pointed fingers at the local tribes. The boy still hadn't been found. After changing into dry clothes, Sarah helped Mrs. Henderson with the morning chores. They tended the small vegetable garden, fed the chickens, and began preparing preserves from the late summer fruit. But Sarah found her mind wandering repeatedly to Ayana. Had she made it safely to her village? Was her injured leg causing her too much pain? Around midday, their neighbor Mr. Collins arrived with troubling news. He was a thin, nervous man who seemed to always bring the worst gossip from town. "There's been tracks found," he announced without preamble. "Native tracks crossing the river near where young Sarah here gets the water." Sarah's blood turned cold, but she forced herself to continue stirring the jam as if nothing was wrong. "What kind of tracks?" Mrs. Henderson asked calmly. "Fresh ones, made sometime this morning by the look of them. Single person, moving from the east side to the west." Mr. Collins glanced meaningfully at Sarah. "You didn't see anything unusual this morning, did you, girl?" Sarah kept her eyes on the bubbling fruit. "Just mist and water, same as always." Mr. Collins didn't look entirely convinced. "Well, Sheriff Davis wants everyone to be extra careful. Could be a scout checking our defenses, or worse, someone planning mischief." After Mr. Collins left, Mrs. Henderson worked in silence for several minutes. Finally, she spoke without looking up from her sewing. "That pendant you're wearing. It's beautiful work." Sarah's hands stilled on her task. "Mrs. Henderson, I've lived on this frontier for 30 years, child. I've seen enough to know when someone's carrying a weight they can't share." The older woman set down her needle and looked directly at Sarah. "I also know the difference between tracks made by someone running away and tracks made by someone being helped." Sarah's throat felt tight. "You saw?" "I saw enough. 2 sets of prints by the water's edge, one deeper than the other, like someone was leaning heavy on a companion. I saw where 2 people entered the water together and came out on the far side." Mrs. Henderson's voice was gentle but serious. "I also saw you came back alone." The story spilled out of Sarah then. Everything from finding Ayanna injured by the river to the difficult crossing to the gift of the eagle pendant. Mrs. Henderson listened without interruption, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. "Child," she said when Sarah finished, "you did a kind thing, but it may have consequences neither of us can predict." "I couldn't just leave her there," Sarah said defensively. "I know, and I'm proud of you for that, but you need to understand what you've stepped into." Mrs. Henderson moved to the window and gazed out toward the forest. "Relations between our peoples have been strained for months. Every action gets watched, every gesture gets interpreted. Your kindness might be seen as something else entirely." "What do you mean?" "Some will see it as proof that you're in league with them. Others might think you were forced to help, which could make them angry at the tribes for threatening a young girl." Mrs. Henderson sighed heavily. "And if word reaches the wrong ears that a native girl was scouting our side of the river, the implications hit Sarah like a cold wave. Her simple act of helping someone in need could be twisted into evidence of spying or conspiracy. In the current climate of fear and suspicion, such accusations could lead to violence. What should I do?" Sarah asked quietly. "For now, nothing. Keep that pendant hidden and don't speak of this to anyone else. If asked directly about the tracks, tell the truth, but only what's necessary. You saw a girl who was hurt, you helped her cross, she went her way." Mrs. Henderson returned to her chair. "But Sarah, you need to be prepared for the possibility that this won't stay secret. In a small community like ours, secrets have a way of coming to light." That afternoon, more visitors arrived. Sheriff Davis himself came by, a tall man with graying hair and tired eyes. He asked Sarah to recount her morning activities, and she told him about finding the injured girl and helping her cross the river. She left out details about the conversation and the pendant, but otherwise told the truth. "Native girl, you say?" Sheriff Davis made notes in a small book. "Did she say anything about why she was on our side of the river?" "She was running and fell. Hurt her leg," Sarah replied. "She just wanted to get back across." "Running from what, I wonder?" the sheriff mused. "Or to what?" After he left, Mrs. Henderson pulled Sarah aside once more. "You did well. Told the truth without volunteering more than necessary. But I have a feeling this is just the beginning." As evening approached, Sarah found herself repeatedly touching the eagle pendant through her dress. She wondered if Ayanna had made it safely home, and whether the girl's people knew about her injury. She also wondered if helping Ayanna would bring trouble to Mrs. Henderson, who had already risked so much by taking in an orphan. The last light was fading when they heard horses approaching. Through the window, Sarah could see several riders coming up the path, more than she could count in the growing darkness. "Stay calm," Mrs. Henderson whispered, but Sarah could hear the tension in her voice. The riders stopped in front of the cabin and one dismounted. Sarah recognized him as Tom Bradley, son of one of the larger landowners and known for his strong opinions about the native tribes. "Evening, Mrs. Henderson," he called out. "Mind if we have a word with your girl here? Got some questions about this morning's activities." Mrs. Henderson stepped onto the porch, Sarah close behind her. "It's rather late for questions, Mr. Bradley. Perhaps this could wait until morning." "Afraid not, ma'am. See, we've been talking to folks, and we think there might be more to this river crossing story than meets the eye." Bradley's tone was polite, but carried an underlying threat. "We'd like to hear it again from the beginning." Sarah felt the eagle pendant against her skin, warm and somehow comforting. Whatever happened next, she had done the right thing in helping Ayanna. She just hoped that righteousness would be enough to protect both her and Mrs. Henderson from whatever these men had in mind. Sarah stepped forward, despite Mrs. Henderson's restraining hand on her shoulder. In the flickering light from their oil lamp, She could count 7 mounted men, all armed and all watching her with suspicious eyes. "I already told Sheriff Davis everything," she said, keeping her voice steady. "There's nothing more to add." Tom Bradley dismounted and approached the porch steps. Behind him, the other riders shifted restlessly in their saddles. "See, that's where you might be wrong, girl. We've been doing some thinking, some investigating, found some interesting things, such as..." Mrs. Henderson asked, her tone sharp. Bradley reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of torn fabric. Even in the dim light, Sarah could see it was buckskin, the kind used in native clothing. "Found this caught on a branch about 50 yards from where you claim this crossing happened. Fresh torn, still had threads hanging loose." Sarah's heart sank. It must have been from Ayanna's dress when they struggled through the undergrowth near the riverbank. "Could be from anyone," Mrs. Henderson pointed out. "Hunters, trappers." "Could be," Bradley agreed, "but it's not. See, we also found something else." He gestured to one of the other riders who dismounted and approached carrying a bundle. "Show them, Pete." Pete unwrapped the bundle, revealing a small beaded pouch. Sarah recognized it immediately as the one Ayanna had reached into when giving her the eagle pendant. "Found this about 20 yards into the forest on the far side," Pete announced. "Still had some of its contents." He opened the pouch and poured several items into his palm. Another small carved bone piece, some dried herbs, and what looked like a few glass trading beads. Sarah forced herself not to react, though her mind was racing. Ayanna must have dropped the pouch during her escape, probably when the pain in her leg caused her to stumble. "Now," Bradley continued, "here's what we think happened. This wasn't some chance encounter with an injured girl. This was a planned meeting. You helped a native scout cross to survey our defenses, then helped her get back with information." "That's ridiculous," Sarah protested. "I've never seen that girl before in my life." "Maybe not," said another rider from the shadows. "But maybe you've been helping them for a while. Maybe that's why you go to the river every morning. Same time, same place. Perfect spot for passing messages or meeting contacts." Mrs. Henderson stepped fully in front of Sarah. "These are serious accusations you're making. Mr. Bradley, I hope you have more evidence than some torn cloth and a lost pouch." "We're getting to that," Bradley replied ominously. "See, we decided to ask around town about young Sarah here. Found out some interesting things about her background." Sarah's blood chilled. She knew where this was heading. "Turns out," Bradley continued, "before she came to live with you, Mrs. Henderson, Sarah spent time at the mission school. You know, the one that takes in native children along with orphans. The one where they're supposed to learn our ways, but instead sometimes learn theirs." It was true, though not in the way Bradley was suggesting. Sarah had spent 6 months at the mission school after her parents died, before Mrs. Henderson took her in. During that time, she had indeed learned some words in the local tribal language from the native children there. But it had been innocent friendship, nothing more. "Learning to communicate with people different from yourself isn't a crime," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "Depends on how you use that communication," Pete interjected. "Girl speaks their language, knows their customs. Perfect spy material." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. "I helped someone who was hurt. That's all. If that makes me a spy, then I guess being human makes me guilty." Bradley studied her face carefully. Strong words for someone with nothing to hide. "But here's the thing, girl. We found more than just that pouch and fabric. We found tracks heading away from the river on the far side. Tracks that split into 2 different directions." Sarah's confusion must have shown on her face because Bradley smiled coldly. "That's right. Looks like your injured friend wasn't alone after all. Looks like someone was waiting for her. Someone who helped her disappear real quick once she crossed back over." This was news to Sarah. She had seen no sign of anyone else in the forest when Ayanna left. But then again, she had been focused on her own dangerous return crossing. "Now why," Bradley continued, "would a native girl need an escort waiting for her unless she was carrying important information?" "Information about our side of the river?" Mrs. Henderson stepped forward. "Mr. Bradley, you're building an entire conspiracy theory on some torn cloth and footprints. You have no proof that Sarah knew anything about any escort, or that this girl was anything more than what Sarah described." "Maybe not yet," Bradley admitted, "but we aim to find out. Sheriff Davis has given us permission to search these premises for any evidence of collaboration with the enemy." "The enemy?" Sarah burst out. "They're not enemies. They're people just like us." A murmur went through the mounted men at her words. Bradley's eyes narrowed. Interesting perspective for someone claiming innocence, he said. Most loyal settlers understand the threat these savages pose to our families and our way of life. Mrs. Henderson placed a warning hand on Sarah's arm, but Sarah was too angry to stay quiet. The only threat I see right now is a group of armed men intimidating a woman and a girl. Based on wild theories and fear, she shot back. The tension in the air grew thick. Several of the riders moved their hands closer to their weapons. Sarah, Mrs. Henderson said quietly, enough. But Bradley was studying Sarah with new interest. You know what I think? I think this girl has been turned. Spent too much time around the mission, learned to sympathize with the wrong side. Probably doesn't even realize she's being used. That's not true, Sarah protested, but even as she said it, she wondered if there was some truth to his words. Not about being used or turned, but about sympathizing. She had seen the fear in Ayana's eyes, the pain from her injury, the gratitude for a simple act of kindness. How could she not sympathize with another human being in distress? We'll see, Bradley said. Pete, Jack, search the cabin. Look for anything that doesn't belong to proper Christian folk. Native crafts, strange herbs, any kind of signaling devices. Mrs. Henderson stood straighter. I demand to see your warrant. Don't need one, Bradley replied. Sheriff gave us broad authority to investigate possible collaboration. You can take it up with him tomorrow if you don't like it. Two of the men dismounted and pushed past Mrs. Henderson into the cabin. Sarah could hear them moving around inside, opening drawers and cabinets, searching through their few belongings. This is wrong, Sarah said, but her voice sounded small in the night air. What's wrong, Bradley said, is helping the enemy scout our weaknesses. What's wrong is putting your neighbors in danger because you feel sorry for some injured savage. The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. Without thinking, her hand moved to the pendant hidden beneath her dress, seeking its small comfort. The movement was slight, but Bradley caught it. What's that you're hiding there, girl? He asked, stepping closer. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. Nothing. Show me, Bradley demanded. There's no need for this, Mrs. Henderson began, but Bradley cut her off. There's every need. Girl's been fidgeting with something under her dress since we got here. Time to see what she's hiding. The two men emerged from the cabin at that moment. Nothing unusual inside, one reported. Just normal household items and women's things. Bradley nodded but kept his eyes on Sarah. What about on her person? Sarah took a step backward, but there was nowhere to go. The porch steps were behind Bradley, and Mrs. Henderson couldn't protect her from everything. I'm not hiding anything wrong, she said desperately. Then you won't mind showing us, Bradley replied, reaching toward her. That's when they heard the sound that would change everything. The soft thud of many feet moving in perfect synchronization, barely audible but somehow felt in the ground beneath their feet. Every head turned toward the forest, and what they saw there froze them all in place. Silent figures emerged from the tree line, moving like shadows given form. Even in the darkness, their number was clear. Many more than the 7 mounted settlers. The figures materialized from the darkness like spirits taking solid form. Sarah counted at least 20, though in the shifting shadows cast by their lamp the exact number was impossible to determine. They moved with complete silence, arranged in a wide semicircle that gradually enclosed the front of the cabin. Bradley and his men instinctively reached for their weapons, but the sound of arrows being nocked stopped them cold. The clicking of wooden shafts against bowstrings seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Nobody move, Bradley hissed to his men, though his voice carried clearly in the still night air. Mrs. Henderson gripped Sarah's hand tightly, both of them frozen on the porch. Sarah could feel her own pulse hammering in her throat, and the eagle pendant seemed to burn against her skin. One of the native warriors stepped forward from the group. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with intricate tattoos visible on his arms and chest even in the dim light. Feathers hung from his dark hair, and a beaded band crossed his forehead. When he spoke, his English was clear and precise. We come in peace, he announced, his voice carrying easily across the yard. We seek the one who helped our daughter. Bradley found his voice first. Your daughter was spying on our settlement. We have proof she was gathering intelligence. The warrior's expression didn't change. Ayana was gathering medicine plants. She fell and injured herself while fleeing from your hunting party. His gaze moved pointedly to Bradley, the same party that has been crossing into our territory without permission for many days. That's a lie, one of Bradley's men protested. Is it? The warrior gestured slightly. and another native man stepped forward carrying a familiar-looking rifle. This weapon bears the markings of Thomas Bradley. We found it 3 days' walk into our lands, abandoned near a deer carcass that had been taken without proper respect. Sarah saw Bradley's face pale slightly. She remembered hearing gossip about Tom Bradley's rifle going missing during a hunting trip the previous week. Even if that's true, Bradley said, his voice less confident than before, it doesn't explain why your girl was on our side of the river. She was returning from gathering place near the water. When she heard your voices, she hid and injured herself trying to escape. The warrior's eyes found Sarah. A young one with kind heart helped her cross to safety. Mrs. Henderson squeezed Sarah's hand tighter. The revelation that Sarah had helped Ayanna was now out in the open, spoken by the natives themselves. You see, Bradley turned to his men triumphantly. Proof of collaboration. The girl was working with them. No, the warrior said firmly. The young one acted from goodness, not planning. She saved Ayanna's life and asked for nothing in return. Such kindness creates debt that must be honored. Another figure stepped out from the group of warriors. Sarah's heart leaped as she recognized Ayanna. Though the girl looked different now, she was dressed in beautiful beaded clothing and walked without any sign of her earlier injury. Her long hair was braided with feathers and small shells that caught the lamplight. Sarah, Ayanna called out clearly, you are safe. We come to protect you. Protect her from what? Mrs. Henderson asked, speaking for the first time since the warriors appeared. The lead warrior's expression grew grave. Word has reached us that some among your people plan harm to the one who helped our daughter. They believe false stories about spying and betrayal. His gaze swept over Bradley and his mounted men. We cannot allow harm to come to one who showed mercy. Bradley laughed harshly. You're outnumbered and outgunned. 7 mounted men with rifles against your bows and arrows. 7? The warrior seemed genuinely puzzled. He made a slight gesture, and the sound of more movement came from the forest. Additional figures emerged from different directions, until Sarah could see they were completely surrounded. We count 30 warriors, and these are not only bows. Some of the newcomers carried rifles as well, Sarah noticed with growing amazement. The balance of power was not at all what Bradley had assumed. What do you want? Bradley demanded, though his voice had lost much of its earlier authority. Justice, the warrior replied simply, and peace. Our daughter tells us of the goodness she found in the heart of the young settler. Such goodness should be protected, not punished. Ayanna stepped closer to the porch. Sarah, wear the eagle, she said, pointing to her chest. Eagle protects those who protect others. Sarah's hand moved involuntarily to the hidden pendant, confirming Ayanna's words. Several of Bradley's men exchanged uneasy glances. This is madness, Pete muttered. We can't just stand here and negotiate with savages. The word hung in the air like a challenge. The lead warrior's expression hardened. Savages, he repeated slowly. You use this word while you threaten an innocent girl. While you invade our lands and take our game without honor. While you seek to punish kindness and reward cruelty. He shook his head. Perhaps you should look more carefully at who behaves as savages. Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat. If I may, she said, stepping forward slightly. What exactly are you proposing? We propose truth, the warrior answered. The young one acted with pure heart to help our injured daughter. This should be celebrated, not punished. We propose that those who would harm her reconsider their path. And if we don't? Bradley asked. The warrior was quiet for a long moment. Then we will protect her as our own daughter. We will not allow harm to come to one who showed mercy to Ayanna. The implication was clear. If Bradley and his men tried to harm Sarah, they would face the consequences from 30 native warriors who had already proven they could move unseen and unheard through the forest. This is insane, Bradley said, but his voice lacked conviction. You can't just adopt white settlers because they helped one of yours. We do not adopt, the warrior corrected. We honor debt. We protect those who protect ours. This is our way. Ayanna spoke again, her voice carrying clearly in the night air. Sarah has eagle spirit. Eagle sees all, protects all who need protection. She is under Eagle's wing now. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the surreal nature of the situation. A few hours ago, her biggest worry had been keeping the pendant hidden. Now she was apparently under the protection of an entire native war party. What does this mean for me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The lead warrior heard her anyway. It means you are safe from those who would hurt you for your kindness. It means you have friends in the forest who will watch over you. It means the eagle you wear is not just decoration, but a promise. Bradley's horse shifted nervously beneath him, picking up on the tension in the air. This doesn't end here, he said, though he made no move to dismount or advance. There will be consequences. The authorities won't stand for this. Then perhaps, the warrior said calmly, the authorities should learn the full truth before making judgments. Perhaps they should know about the hunting parties crossing into our territory. Perhaps they should know about the missing rifles and the game taken without permission. It was becoming clear that the native tribes knew far more about the settlers' activities than anyone had realized. Bradley's face grew darker as he realized his position was much weaker than he had thought. We go now, the warrior announced. But we watch, we listen. Sarah is under our protection. Any who would harm her must first answer to us. The warriors began melting back into the forest as silently as they had appeared. Within moments, only the lead warrior and Ayanna remained visible. Thank you, Sarah called out to Ayanna, for speaking for me. Ayanna smiled. You speak for yourself with your actions. Eagle knows true heart. Then she too disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the lead warrior. Remember, he said to Bradley and his men, the forest has eyes. The eagle watches. Choose your next actions with wisdom. And then he was gone as well, leaving the settlers alone in front of the cabin with their horses in their confusion. The silence that followed the warrior's departure was deafening. Bradley and his men sat frozen on their horses, their eyes scanning the forest edge for any sign of movement. Sarah could hear her own breathing and the nervous snorting of the horses, but nothing else. Well, Mrs. Henderson finally said, her voice steady despite everything that had just happened. I believe that settles the matter. Bradley wheeled his horse around to face her. Settles it? This settles nothing. If anything, it proves the girl is in league with them. They knew exactly where to find her, knew exactly what had happened. They knew because their daughter told them, Mrs. Henderson replied calmly, just as you knew because you investigated the river crossing. The difference is they came to thank Sarah while you came to threaten her. Pete shifted nervously in his saddle. Tom, maybe we should head back to town. Report what happened here. Report what exactly? One of the other riders asked. That we got surrounded by 30 armed warriors and had to listen to a lecture about respecting kindness. Bradley's jaw tightened. We report that there's been contact between settlers and the native tribes. Secret contact, and that this girl here is somehow at the center of it. Sarah stepped forward, feeling braver now that the immediate threat had passed. There was no secret contact, Mr. Bradley. I helped an injured person cross a river. That's what any decent human being would do. Decent human beings don't get protected by war parties. Bradley shot back. Maybe they do when other people threaten to harm them for showing basic kindness, Sarah replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Mrs. Henderson placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. I think it's time for you gentlemen to leave. It's late, and as you can see, there's nothing here that concerns you. Bradley looked like he wanted to argue further, but Pete leaned over and whispered something urgent in his ear. After a moment, Bradley nodded grimly. This isn't over, he said, gathering his reins. The whole territory will hear about what happened here tonight. People will want answers. Then make sure they hear the truth, Mrs. Henderson said firmly. A young girl helped someone in need, and you tried to punish her for it. Let people judge for themselves what that says about each of you. The mounted men began turning their horses toward the path leading back to town. As they prepared to leave, Bradley called back one final threat. You'd better hope your new friends stay close, girl. Because if they don't, you'll find out just how long memories can be in a place like this. Sarah watched them ride away, their torches creating moving pools of light that gradually disappeared into the distance. Only when the last sound of hoofbeats had faded did she realize she was trembling. Come inside, Mrs. Henderson said gently. We need to talk. They settled at the small kitchen table with cups of chamomile tea. Sarah's hand shook slightly as she lifted her cup, and Mrs. Henderson waited patiently for her to calm down before speaking. Sarah, I need you to understand what just happened here, the older woman began. This situation has grown far beyond a simple river crossing. I know, Sarah said quietly. I never meant for any of this to happen. I believe that. But intentions don't always control consequences. Mrs. Henderson leaned forward. Those warriors didn't just happen to find us tonight. They've been watching, probably since this morning. They knew about Bradley's investigation before he did. The implication sent a chill through Sarah. You think they've been watching me? I think they've been watching all of us. Remember what that warrior said about hunting parties crossing into their territory? They know things we don't know they know. Mrs. Henderson sipped her tea thoughtfully. The question is, what do we do now? Sarah touched the eagle pendant through her dress. What did Ayanna mean about being under the eagle's protection? What does that really mean? I'm not entirely sure, but I suspect it means you're safer than you were a few hours ago, and possibly in more danger at the same time. Mrs. Henderson set down her cup. Safer from immediate threats like Bradley and his friends, but in more danger from the larger conflict that's brewing between the settlers and the tribes. What larger conflict? Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding how much to share. There have been incidents, Sarah, more than what gets talked about in town. Missing livestock, burned fields, settlers finding signs that they're being watched, and now we know the tribes have been tracking our movements into their territory. Sarah felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. Are you saying there's going to be a war? I'm saying there's already a war of sorts. It's just been fought quietly, in shadows and whispers and small acts of aggression. What happened tonight brought it into the open. Mrs. Henderson reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. The question is whether your act of kindness will help heal the divisions or make them worse. How could helping someone make things worse? Because now both sides are invested in you. The warriors see you as proof that some settlers can be trusted. People like Bradley see you as evidence that we're being infiltrated and turned against our own kind. Mrs. Henderson squeezed Sarah's hand. You've become a symbol, child, whether you wanted to be or not. The weight of this responsibility felt crushing. Sarah had simply wanted to help an injured girl cross a river. She had never intended to become involved in territorial conflicts or intercultural politics. What should I do? She asked. For now, nothing different than what you've been doing. Continue with your daily routines, but be more careful. Don't go to the river alone anymore. Stay close to home when possible. Mrs. Henderson's expression grew serious. And Sarah, that pendant you're wearing, keep it hidden but don't take it off. Why not? Because I have a feeling it's more than just a gift. The way Ayanna spoke about it, the way the other warriors reacted when she mentioned it, I think it's some kind of protection symbol, a sign that you're under their care. Mrs. Henderson paused, which means removing it might be seen as rejecting their protection. Sarah nodded, understanding the delicate balance they were now walking. Too much association with the tribes would make them targets among the settlers, but rejecting the tribe's protection might leave them vulnerable to retaliation. Over the next few days, life took on a strange new rhythm. Sarah still did her daily chores, but Mrs. Henderson accompanied her to the river each morning. They saw no sign of Ayanna or any other native people, but Sarah often felt as though they were being watched. It wasn't a threatening feeling, more like a sense of invisible guardianship. Word of the confrontation at their cabin spread quickly through the settlement. Some people, like Sheriff Davis, seemed relieved that the incident had ended without violence. Others, particularly those aligned with Bradley, viewed Sarah with increasing suspicion. On the fourth day after the confrontation, Mrs. Henderson returned from town with troubling news. There's been a meeting, she announced as she set down her market basket. Bradley and some of the other landowners. They're organizing what they're calling a protective patrol to watch for native activity near the settlement. Sarah looked up from her mending. What kind of patrol? Armed men riding regular circuits around the perimeter. Officially, they're just watching for signs of trouble. Unofficially, Mrs. Henderson shook her head. I'm afraid they're looking for excuses to escalate tensions. And me? They've made it clear that anyone suspected of collaboration will be closely monitored. Mrs. Henderson sat down heavily. Sarah, I think it might be time to consider sending you away for a while. I have a sister in the eastern settlements beyond all this territorial disputes. You could stay with her until things calm down. The suggestion hit Sarah like a physical blow. Leave Mrs. Henderson? Leave the only home she had known since her parents died? I won't run away. It wouldn't be running away. It would be staying safe. What about you? If I leave, won't they think you helped me escape? Won't that make you a target too? Mrs. Henderson's silence was answer enough. Sarah realized that no matter what they decided, both of them were now caught in the middle of something much larger and more dangerous than a simple act of kindness. That night, as Sarah lay in her small bed listening to the night sounds of the forest, she heard something that made her heart race. Soft footsteps on the roof above her room, moving with deliberate care. Then a gentle tapping at her window. She rose quietly and moved to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek out. Ayana's face appeared in the moonlight, pressed close to the glass. Sarah's heart hammered as she carefully opened the window, trying not to make any noise that might wake Mrs. Henderson. Ayana slipped inside with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to moving silently in the dark. "You should not be here," Sarah whispered, though she was glad to see her friend was truly unharmed. "I come with warning," Ayana said softly, settling cross-legged on the floor near Sarah's bed. "My father's warriors watch the men who threaten you. They plan something bad." Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, pulling a shawl around her shoulders against the night chill. "What kind of something bad?" "The angry man, Bradley. He speaks with others about proving you are spy. They plan to make evidence that looks real." Ayana's English was more careful at night, as if the darkness made the foreign words harder to find. "They will say you pass messages to my people. They will say you know things only spy could know." A cold dread settled in Sarah's stomach. "What kind of evidence?" "False evidence. They will plant things near your home, near the river where you helped me, things that belong to my people. Then they will find these things and say you hid them." Ayana's dark eyes reflected the moonlight streaming through the window. "My father says this is old trick. Make truth from lies by creating proof where none exists." Sarah felt sick. She should have known that Bradley wouldn't simply give up after being humiliated in front of his men. "When?" "Tomorrow night, maybe next night. They wait for the moon to be dark so they can move without being seen." Ayana reached out and touched the eagle pendant that Sarah now wore openly in the privacy of her own room. "But eagle sees even in darkness. My people will watch them. Then you can stop them," Sarah said hopefully. Ayana shook her head sadly. "If we stop them, they will say it proves you work with us. If we do nothing, they will plant their false evidence and accuse you anyway." She paused, struggling with the complexity of the situation. There is no path that does not lead to trouble. Sarah slumped back against her pillow, feeling trapped. "So what can we do?" "My father has idea, but you will not like it. Tell me." Ayana was quiet for a moment, as if gathering courage for what she had to say. "He says you must come with us. Live with our people until this danger passes. Be under our protection truly, not just from distance." The suggestion took Sarah's breath away. "Leave everything? Leave Mrs. Henderson? The kind woman can come too if she chooses. My father says anyone who shelters you shares your protection." Ayana leaned forward earnestly. "It would not be forever. Just until the angry men find other things to worry about, or until the tribal council and your leaders can meet and make peace." Sarah's mind raced with the implications. Living with the native tribe would certainly keep her safe from Bradley and his accusations. But it would also confirm in the minds of many settlers that she had indeed been collaborating with them all along. Even if she returned later, she would always be viewed with suspicion. "What would my life be like there?" she asked quietly. "Different, but not bad. You would learn our ways, help with our work. The women would teach you to weave and work with plants for healing. You would be treated as family," Ayana smiled. "And you would be safe. No one can reach you in our village without crossing many warriors first." Sarah thought about Mrs. Henderson, sleeping peacefully in the next room. The older woman had already sacrificed so much to give Sarah a home and a chance at a normal life. How could she ask her to give up everything again? "There's another problem," Sarah said slowly. "If I disappear right before Bradley plants his evidence, won't that make me look guilty? Won't people assume I ran because I knew I was about to be caught?" Ayana nodded reluctantly. "Yes, this is true. But my father says better to look guilty and be alive than to look innocent and be dead." The words sent a chill through Sarah. "Dead? Do you really think they would kill me?" "I think angry men do angry things. And when angry men have weapons and believe they are right?" Ayana shrugged expressively. "My father has seen this before in other places. Fear makes people dangerous." Sarah was quiet for several minutes, wrestling with an impossible decision. Finally, she asked, "How long do I have to decide?" "Not long. If you choose to come with us, it must be tomorrow night. After that, the false evidence will be planted, and it will be too late to leave without looking guilty." "Tomorrow night," Sarah repeated. "That's not much time." "I know, but delay brings danger to everyone. To you, to the kind woman, to my people who watch over you." Ayana rose gracefully to her feet. "I must go now before the moon moves too far across the sky." "Wait," Sarah called softly. She reached under her pillow and pulled out a small hand mirror that had belonged to her mother, one of the few possessions she had been able to keep after her parents died. Take this. If I decide to come with you, I'll hang a white cloth from my window tomorrow evening. If not, Ayanna accepted the mirror, understanding the significance of the gift. If not, we will find other ways to protect you. The eagle does not abandon those under its wings. She moved to the window, then paused. Sarah, there is one more thing. My father wants you to know that your kindness to me has changed minds in our village. There are those who believed all settlers were enemies. Now they see that some have good hearts. Whatever you decide, know that you have already made difference. With that, Ayanna slipped back through the window and disappeared into the night, leaving Sarah alone with the most difficult decision of her young life. Sarah spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, weighing her options. By morning, she was no closer to a decision, but she knew she had to tell Mrs. Henderson about Ayanna's visit and the choice that lay before them. Mrs. Henderson listened to the entire story without interruption, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. When Sarah finished, the older woman was quiet for a long time. So, Mrs. Henderson finally said, "We can stay and face Bradley's false accusations, knowing that we might not survive the consequences, or we can leave everything behind and start over among people we barely know." "I'm sorry," Sarah said miserably. "I never meant to put you in this position. Child, you've done nothing to apologize for. This situation exists because of other people's fear and hatred, not because of your kindness." Mrs. Henderson moved to the window and looked out toward the forest. "The question is, what do we do about it?" Sarah joined her at the window. "What do you think we should do?" "I think," Mrs. Henderson said slowly, "that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit when you're outmatched. Bradley has more men, more weapons, and more influence in the settlement than we do. Fighting him on his terms means almost certain defeat. So you think we should go with Ayanna's people? I think we should seriously consider it. But Sarah, you need to understand what we'd be giving up. This cabin, our neighbors, the life we've built here. Even if we return someday, things will never be the same." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of that truth. "But if we stay and Bradley destroys us with his lies, we lose everything anyway." "True," Mrs. Henderson agreed. "At least this way. We choose our own path rather than having it chosen for us." They spent the day quietly going about their normal routines, but Sarah could feel the tension building toward the evening's decision. As the sun began to set, she finally knew what she had to do. She went to her room and pulled out a white petticoat that she rarely wore. Tearing off a large piece of the fabric, she moved to her window and tied it securely to the frame where it would be visible from the forest. Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway behind her. "So we're doing this?" "We're doing this," Sarah confirmed. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As darkness fell, they gathered their few most precious possessions and waited for their escorts to arrive. Sarah wore the eagle pendant openly now, no longer caring who might see it. Soon she would be among people who understood its meaning and honored what it represented. The last chapter of her life as a settler was ending. Tomorrow a new chapter would begin in a world she had never imagined entering. The soft owl call came just after midnight, so perfectly natural that Sarah almost missed it. But the second call, followed by a third in quick succession, was clearly a signal. She and Mrs. Henderson had been sitting in darkness for hours, their small bundles of belongings ready by the door. "It's time," Mrs. Henderson whispered. They moved carefully through the cabin, taking one last look at the place that had been home for 3 years. Sarah touched the kitchen table where they had shared so many meals, the hearth where they had warmed themselves through 2 winters, the little shelf that held Mrs. Henderson's few precious books. Ayanna appeared at the window like a shadow-given form. She was not alone this time. 2 warriors flanked her, their faces painted with dark stripes that made them nearly invisible in the moonlight. "Are you certain?" Ayanna asked as Sarah opened the window. "We're certain," Sarah replied, though her voice shook slightly. The escape was remarkably simple. The warriors had clearly done this before. They helped Sarah and Mrs. Henderson through the window. Then one of them slipped inside to arrange the cabin to look as though they had simply gone to bed normally. If anyone came looking before morning, it would appear that they were still sleeping. They moved through the forest in single file, with a warrior leading and another bringing up the rear. Ayanna stayed close to Sarah, occasionally touching her arm to guide her around obstacles in the darkness. Mrs. Henderson, despite her age, kept pace without complaint. They walked for what felt like hours, following paths that Sarah couldn't even see. The forest seemed to go on forever, thick and dark and full of sounds she didn't recognize. Several times they stopped while the lead warrior listened carefully to something only he could hear, but each time he eventually signaled them to continue. Finally, they began to descend into a valley that opened up before them like a hidden world. In the distance, Sarah could see the warm glow of fires and the shapes of buildings unlike any she had ever seen. The native village was larger than she had expected, with dozens of structures arranged in careful patterns around central gathering areas. "Welcome to our home," Ayana said softly. As they approached the village, people emerged from the dwellings to greet them. Sarah was surprised to see that many of them were women and children, not the fierce warriors she had been unconsciously expecting. Their faces showed curiosity but also kindness, and several smiled warmly as the group passed. The lead warrior guided them to a large structure near the center of the village. Inside, a council fire burned low and several elders sat in a circle around it. The warrior who had spoken at their cabin rose to greet them. "I am Chief Running Bear," he said formally. "You are welcome in our village, Sarah of the River Crossing, and Mrs. Henderson who shelters the kind-hearted." Mrs. Henderson inclined her head respectfully. "We're grateful for your protection, Chief Running Bear, and we understand that we're asking you to take considerable risk by harboring us." "All worthwhile things carry risk," the chief replied. "Our risk is small compared to the risk you took to help our daughter. Please sit. We have much to discuss." They settled around the fire, and one of the elder women brought them bowls of soup and fresh bread. The food was unfamiliar but delicious, warming Sarah from the inside out. "First," Chief Running Bear said, "you must understand your situation. By coming here, you have crossed a line that many of your people will not forgive. Even if peace is made between our people, some will always see you as traitors." Sarah nodded. "We understand. However," the chief continued, "you have also gained something valuable. You have gained the protection and friendship of the Hawk clan. As long as you are among us, you are family, and even if you choose to leave someday, that bond will remain." Mrs. Henderson spoke up. "What will our daily life be like here? You will be given a dwelling to share and work that contributes to our community. Sarah will learn alongside our young women, and you, Mrs. Henderson, may find that your experience with herbs and healing is valued by our medicine women." The chief smiled. "We believe that all people have gifts to offer, regardless of where they come from." An elder woman named Gentle Moon was assigned to help them settle in. She led them to a comfortable lodge on the outskirts of the village, furnished with sleeping furs, cooking implements, and everything they would need for daily life. "Tomorrow, you rest," Gentle Moon told them. "Day after, you begin learning our ways. But tonight, sleep without fear. You are safe here." Sarah lay awake for a long time that first night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the village settling into sleep. Somewhere in the distance she could hear drums and soft singing. The eagle pendant lay warm against her throat, no longer hidden but openly worn as a sign of her status among the Hawk clan. The next few weeks passed in a blur of new experiences. Sarah learned to weave baskets from river reeds, to identify edible and medicinal plants, and to prepare food in ways she had never imagined. The language came slowly, but Ayana was a patient teacher, and many of the younger people spoke some English. Mrs. Henderson threw herself into learning about native healing practices. Finding that many of the herbs and techniques were similar to what she already knew, she quickly became popular among the village elders for her knowledge of European remedies that could complement their traditional methods. But even as they adapted to their new life, news from the outside world continued to reach them. Traders and scouts brought reports of increasing tensions around the settlement. Bradley had indeed planted evidence of Sarah's supposed collaboration, but when he came to arrest her, he had found only an empty cabin. "He claims you fled in the night because you knew you were about to be exposed," Ayana reported after returning from a scouting mission near the settlement. "Some believe him, but others question why. If you were truly guilty, you didn't take more of your possessions." More troubling was the news that Bradley's patrol had been expanded and was ranging farther into native territory. There had been several confrontations, though no major violence yet. "War comes," Chief Running Bear said grimly during one of their evening council meetings. "The question is whether it can be stopped before too much blood is spilled." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders again. "Is this happening because of me?" Because you protected me. This is happening because fear and hatred have grown stronger than wisdom and understanding, the chief replied. Your presence here is a symptom, not a cause. One evening, nearly a month after their arrival, urgent drums began beating from the village's highest watchtower. The entire community gathered quickly as scouts reported disturbing news. Large force of armed settlers approaching from the east, the lead scout announced. At least 50 men, some on horseback, some on foot. They carry many weapons and move with purpose. Chief Running Bear's expression grew grave. They come for our guests. The question is whether they come to negotiate or to fight. Sarah felt her stomach clench. I won't let you go to war because of me, she said, standing up. I'll go out and face them. No, Ayana said firmly, rising beside her. You are under Eagle's protection. To surrender you would dishonor us all. But people will die, Sarah protested. People may die anyway, Mrs. Henderson said quietly. But at least this way they'll die for something meaningful. Chief Running Bear raised his hand for silence. We will not surrender our guests, but neither will we start a fight. We will meet these settlers as we met the smaller group before, with strength but also with openness to peace. The preparations began immediately. Warriors painted their faces and gathered their weapons, but they also arranged themselves in formations designed to appear strong without being immediately threatening. Women and children were moved to secure areas, but not hidden completely, showing that this was a community, not just a war party. As the sun set, torches appeared on the hillside overlooking the village. The settlers had arrived, and their numbers were even larger than the scouts had reported. Sarah could see the mounted figures of Bradley and his supporters, but there were also official uniforms that suggested the territorial authorities had become involved. Whatever happens, Sarah said to Ayana, I want you to know that helping you cross that river was the best thing I ever did. It led me to understand that courage isn't about fighting. It's about doing what's right even when it's difficult. Ayana squeezed her hand. And I want you to know that your kindness changed more than just my life. It changed how my people see your people. Some bridges once built cannot be broken. As the two groups prepared to face each other across the valley, Sarah realized that her simple act of helping an injured girl had grown into something much larger. The story that had begun with a river crossing was about to reach its conclusion, and its ending would shape the relationship between two peoples for generations to come. The future was uncertain, but Sarah was no longer afraid. She wore the eagle openly now, and she had learned what it truly meant to be under its protection. Whatever came next, she would face it with the courage that had first led her to help a stranger by a river, and the wisdom she had gained from the people who had made her one of their own.